So I gave a talk to a group of men just this past weekend, and I'm just convicted about the topic, and so I just wanted to share it more broadly and just like a little bit of what I talked about this weekend. And I think it's a pretty basic proposition about an issue that I think that our world and our generation faces right now. That I think is kind of glaringly obvious, but relatively unaddressed in certain spheres. I think in Catholic and spiritual spheres in that regard, but the basic proposition, I think, is this: that God's primary mode of communication with us is contemplative silence, knowing that the devil counterattacks with noise. God's primary mode of communication with us, contemplative silence, knowing that the evil one uses noise to counterattack. That's the proposition. There's a book called The Screwtape Letters, written by C.S. Lewis many years ago, and it speaks into this. The book's premise is like there's a senior demon named Screwtape. He's working with his protege, trying to tear humanity down into sin. And there's this quote within the book around this topic, and Screwtape is writing to his protege, and he writes this. It says, the house in question bears a sickening resemblance to the description one human writer made of heaven, he quotes, the region where there is only life, and therefore all that is not music is silence. Music and silence, how I detest them both. Hell has been occupied by noise, the grand dynamism, the audible expression of all that is exultant, ruthless, and virile. Noise, which alone defends us from the silly qualms, despairing scruples, and impossible desires. We will make the whole universe a noise in the end. The melodies and silences of heaven will be shouted down. And, of course, C.S. Lewis isn't Doctrine or Dogma, and this was written many years ago. But if this was written, and I think we see this in our experience, this is written however 50, 60, 70 years ago by C.S. Lewis, how much more present is this to us now who live in like a media age, here where we're doing this and you're receiving this via media. I think it's a generational issue. I, as a 25-year-old, have grown up and have never known life without the internet. Never, I was born into it. Kids these days never will know life without smartphones, unless, tech crashes or something, but they've never known life without it. And I kind of shiver to think what's coming next, virtual reality, AI, whatever the case may be. But I think that this is a real, it of course is like media is maybe part of this noise that is taking attack on contemplative silence, which is God's primary mode of communication. I want to speak into that, but I want to kind of frame it in this, and to start with this. Every human heart has a deep desire for adventure. I think this is true. It's written into us that we strive for and love. We desire to engage and discover thrilling and new experiences. The sense of adventure that we have. I think especially for young people, maybe all people, this can often lead us into snares of different things. Like for young people, it could be, experimenting with drugs or underage drinking or sexual promiscuity, things along those sorts, because they give us this kind of dopamine shot and this thrill because it's something new and discoverable and I guess exciting, adventurous in that way. But I think that what we're seeing right now in today's age, there's this new secret killer that is media. And because it provides, I think what media provides in some sense is a false sense of adventure. For today's age where, we have a generation of people who we refer to as like screenagers, or we have like this, I was just reading about this phenomenon of iPad kids, where like very young kids who are like behave, in order for parents to like solve behavior issues, they just place an iPad in front of their kids. Like, what becomes of young people like toddlers and up who, in order to solve problems, they live in front of an iPad, like just watching videos of how iPad kids grew up and aren't able to like function socially and lose some sense of like play and real adventure because they have this false sense of adventure that's placed in front of them by the snare of media. And of course, I am part of the problem here. This is my personal ethos in talking about this, because I've been on this platform making YouTube videos for 8.5 years now. I've made over 600 videos, millions of views on this platform. So I know, like I get it. I know how this thing works. And I know some of the tactics and how it can be that media just creates so much noise into our lives and can kind of tear us down and detract us from silence. I mean, I know that part of, especially social media, like this, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, is intentionally created to be addictive. Like these social media platforms, there's like suggestions and for you, like the algorithm tailors content towards the things that you're interested in. Like why is it that I just get so sucked in that you have your YouTube rabbit holes, I have my YouTube rabbit holes. Why is it that, I end up at like midnight 30 watching a video of a guy feeding hot dogs to raccoons? Like that's not helping my life. It's just this noise, but we get sucked in. Like I know there's this concept of like content creators, especially on YouTube, like retention editing, like Logan Paul a few years back, or like Mr. Beast, or like YouTube Shorts and like short content things where it's just like jump cuts and like subtitles and like wild transitions and stuff where it's just trying to keep you engaged for as long as possible, because on this platform the algorithm likes watch time. So part of the goal of a content creator and part of the goal, like what the platform is oriented towards, is watch time and retention. The goal is to try to keep you locked in for as long as possible, because that helps the creator. It feeds the algorithm, moves their brand forward, and it helps the platform because then they can get ads and get all this sorts of stuff. So the goal is to keep you on their platform for as long as possible. Social media sites are intentionally addictive. That's one thing. Another example of just like what media can do, the news. I started noticing this a few years ago, and maybe you've noticed this, maybe you haven't. Just like this sense of, I don't know, doom that I feel when the news comes on. Like, I really don't watch the news that much, but when it comes on, especially world news, like national news, it's always like breaking news at this hour. Someone died, or some bomb, or some big political issue, or like something, and like there's this like kind of like eerie music and like it's like breaking news. I don't know. Maybe you have senses, but just like when you're watching the news, just get a sense of how you feel as you're watching it, because I think there's an intentional move here towards, there's a lot of good things happening in the world, but they almost are always talking about the bad stuff on the news, it seems, especially on like national and world news, like the big problems going on in the world, because it feeds into this like the fear that we have. And if fear sells, like we get locked into something, so we need to make sure that we're going to be okay. And like if something really goes south, we got to know. So we got to be locked in. It feeds into like this adrenaline that we have. So just like the almost, I don't know, the doom spreading of the news cycle. I think what it does also, to speak into the spiritually, is it's making a subconscious case against the goodness of God. Like indirectly, what it's saying is like there's bad things going on in the world. So it makes a case against that God is good and that God is in control. Because it's harder to believe that if like there's bad things going on and things are just like really going south. And like what does that do to the way that we think and approach the world, communicate with other people? We become cynical, we become fearful, we live differently. It's harder for us to live a Christian life believing in a good God who is in control. So what the news cycle does is it makes this indirect case against the goodness of God. So may we not buy into it. The noise of the news and social media and the addictiveness of it. It provides, media, the internet in general, provides this false sense of adventure because of the infinite possibility. You can find anything you want online. You can, go halfway across the world, learn about anything that you want in the entire world. And it can lead to places like pornography. It can lead to things that are like incredibly detrimental to ourselves and objectifying other people, because there's infinite possibility, there's like zero accountability and anonymity, and there's almost zero effort involved. Like this is accessible at all times. And I can go wherever I want, do whatever I want with like very little effort. So there's not challenge involved. I call it like a false sense of adventure, because there's infinite discoverable new thrilling possibility, but without the challenge, without the suffering, Where in the real world, the dopamine that comes from like accomplishing something takes place at the cost of some kind of suffering, some striving to accomplish and achieve things. But with media and what we can find online, it's at the palm of our hand with little effort, little sacrifice or cost or struggle. It provides the same amount of dopamine, and our bodies want to take the path of least resistance. So we get sucked in and we receive this false sense of dopamine. I think what it does is we get a false sense of adventure, and we have a whole generation, a world of people who become soft, become impossible to please, overstimulated and confused because they're sucked into media and filled with noise and filled with many, many voices speaking and not the one that they're supposed to hear. Because again, what this noise does is it detracts us from contemplative silence, which is God's primary mode of communication. He is the one who speaks to us the truth about who we are. So I think this is a serious thing that we ought to approach pretty seriously. So how do we approach this? I'm going to maybe offer something relatively bold. I don't know if you ever read the book of Joshua. The book of Joshua I think is fascinating, but kind of the narrative of the book of Joshua is after Moses dies, finally, Joshua leads the Israelites into the promised land. But what God instructs the Israelites to do in the land that's filled with foreigners, right before they enter into the promised land, Deuteronomy chapter 20, the Lord says to Joshua, "As for the towns of these people that the Lord your God is giving you as an inheritance, you must not let anything that breathes remain alive. You shall annihilate them. The Hittites, the Amorites, Canaanites, Perizzites, blah, 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 just as the Lord your God has commanded." And this is like one of the like sort of controversial things that I think probably rubs a lot of people the wrong way about the Bible. And it's a hard thing to justify and like connect with a good God. Because kind of this is like very serious, utter destruction and annihilation that the Lord, like almost genocide type of instructions from the Lord. They're like when they go into foreign territory with people who have different gods, different customs, the Lord tells them to destroy everyone and everything, burn the place down. Now, this seems like, again, incredibly bold and almost too extreme, but why? Why would the Lord instruct people, a good God, instruct his chosen people to do something like this? The next verse, verse 18, he says, "Do all these things so that they may not teach you to do all the abhorrent things that they do for their gods, and thus you sin against the Lord your God." Because God knows us. He knows how fickle we are and how easy we are to be swayed. And it was from our ancestors, from Adam and Eve, who had everything they could ever want in the garden, and they were swayed by the serpent so easily for just a piece of fruit from a tree. Why would we think that we are any better than this? Jesus, who similarly gives us this almost like this very extreme, kind of like if your hand causes you to sin, cut it off. It's kind of hyperbolic, it's kind of extreme, but the Lord knows, because then when we get to, through the book of Joshua, where Joshua is faithful to the Lord's instruction, into the next book of Judges, then we see some of the judges start to let some of the people live and let some of the culture stay. And immediately it says the Israelites did what was evil against the Lord, and they're given into the hands of their enemies. Because God knows, he knows our hearts better than we do. So maybe what the Lord is giving us an invitation to is to make some kind of a bold response to this, because the situation is bad. Like the world we live in. I maybe want to give you this image of like how bad is it right now. So Jake Ferguson he's tight end for the Dallas Cowboys. I grew up with Jake. We played sports together, went to the same high school. We were 12-year-old Little League champions together. Back when we were in 5th or 6th grade, Jake, growing up in the area, was always like biggest, strongest, most athletic kid. We went to different Catholic schools growing up. And in 5th or 6th grade, I distinctly remember a basketball game where we were playing against them. Our team didn't win a game all season. Their team was undefeated. So it was clearly a mismatch. And by halftime, the scoreboard was off. We probably scored like 5 points that game. They probably scored like 70. In the middle of the third quarter, Jake, biggest, strongest, most athletic dude, got up in the middle of the third quarter, went to the concession stand and grabbed a hot dog, and then walked back to the bench and was eating a hot dog on the bench. Jake Ferguson eating a hot dog on the bench with the scoreboard turned off. We knew we were getting smoked. We knew we had zero chance. The game was over at that point. I just want to like impart the maybe the thought that like if the world that we live in today is a world where like I can't wake up in the morning and not check my phone the first thing, or like I can't go sit on the toilet without having my phone in my hand, or if I have like 30 seconds to a minute between responsibilities or activities and my immediate response is checking my phone, even though I've just checked my phone 2 minutes ago, or I'm just like scrolling for no reason, or like I'm at a stoplight. I do this. I'll get to a stoplight and I might have like this, the light might turn green 15 seconds from now, but I'm pulling out my phone to scroll on social media just to fill that little bit of time because we almost need noise. We're accustomed to noise. If that's the case for us, we're getting smoked. Like I work with college students, we go down campus and try to talk to people. Probably 75-80% of college students are walking down like through the hallways and through buildings with headphones in, eyes on the ground, because they need noise. We're accustomed to noise, to media at all times. And I think this is not just like a young people's problem. I mean, growing up in my house, I remember the TV was almost always on. Even if no one was watching it, like we'd be sitting at dinner and the TV was on in the background. There's like just extra noise, or there's music or something. It's just like a constant for us in our world that we have screens and noise and things just around us all the time, and we're almost uncomfortable without it. The average screen time for a person living in the United States, not just for young people, for all people, 7 hours a day. And I just want to maybe paint this for you that like. I don't know how much time you spend in prayer in a day or in a week. Say like, I don't know, if all you do is go to mass on Sunday 1 hour a week versus 7 hours a day. Say you're in like a court of law and you give one side like 7 hours a day to make their case and the other side 1 hour a week. It's like 50-1, like 7 hours a day, 7 days a week, almost 50 hours to 1. If God wasn't Lord of the universe, he would stand no chance. Thank God that he is. But this is something we ought to do something about. And I just want to make an invitation to boldness on this. We might argue that this is almost unavoidable in the world that we live in, where like, I mean, for my job, I spend a lot of time on a computer during the day. But like, I ask myself this question relatively often of like, if I were to just cut out media from my life, how connected, like how much do I need to actually stay connected with the world around me? Like if I had zero social media, like just deleted it entirely, would I still be able to stay connected with the people around me, function well in society, have friends and family, go about my work and live life well? Yeah, probably. I probably would make it. Like I'd still find out about stuff. I'd still talk to people. How much do we really need? I think it's not that much. And I think it's almost uncomfortable for us, but to take some bold steps against this, because I think it's really serious, because what it's doing is it's creating noise and it's distracting us from the place of contemplative silence to hear the Lord's voice. This is how he desires to speak to us. In 1 Kings chapter 19, Elijah goes up the mountain to encounter the Lord. There's a great driving wind and the Lord was not in the wind. There's an earthquake and the Lord was not in the earthquake. There's a raging fire. The Lord was not in the fire, but in the still small whisper of silence, the Lord was there. And this is what we need. Jesus, who becomes incarnate as a child, who enters this world in silence, who comes to meet us in contemplative silence. He desires for us to come away from the noise for a while, just to be in his presence so he can speak this good word that his Father spoke to him. You, my beloved Son, you are my beloved daughter, and with you I am well pleased. To be rooted in our identity, we need to hear that. The voice of the Father, the only one who confirms our true identity. No wonder we live in a world where people are confused about their identity because there's a million voices speaking to us all day, except for the one voice that says what's real and true about us. You are my beloved Son. You are my beloved daughter. With you I am well pleased. We need to hear the voice of the Father, and he speaks in contemplative silence. And we live in a world with a lot of noise. So what can we do about it? I think to take drastic measures, to consider this. Because friends, to live fullness and to live truly rooted in who we were meant to be We need to hear the Father's voice, to step away from the noise of the world and come to a place where we can rest and hear the truth about who we are today. Now you are watching me speak this video to you online. Maybe it's time to put the phone away, the computer away, and go listen to the Lord.